2024 Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. refused to commit to supporting President Biden should the incumbent beat him in the party's primary. Here he is with News Nation's Elizabeth Vargas in the town hall event on Wednesday.
So if you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do. Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, if people are living up to democratic values and having debates and having discussions and, talking to each other, but I'm not going to buy.
And if you feel that's not happening, would you then support a Republican or run as an independent?
You know what? My plan is to win this election, and I don't have a plan B.
Biden is still commanding a strong lead against his challengers in the polls, but since mounting a primary challenge against the president in April, RFK Jr. has polled in the double digits, posing a major threat to the Biden campaign. So we're getting shades of Trump there, of course, not promising to support the eventual nominee, but RFK Jr. is not a traditional Democrat, so I didn't find this particularly surprising, Jessica. And I don't even really particularly like the idea that you have to support your party's nominee regardless of who they might be.
Yeah, I don't think it's a far off take. I think a lot of people who are lifelong Democrats would agree with him. The Democratic Party has gotten away from its values of being this kind of a party that supports working people, that supports unions, that passes legislation that protects working class people from exploitation from America's biggest corporation. It's turned into a party that does the bidding of those corporations, and it's been that way for quite some time. And so I am not surprised by RFK Jr. saying this, and I'm not surprised by the base of Democratic voters saying this about Joe Biden. It's very clear where he stands, and it's not far off to say in these conditions, where if there is a face-off between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and the polling shows that the majority of Americans don't want either of those candidates to become president, and they don't want those two to be the nominees, it's likely this could be a third-party scenario where we have a viable candidate running with a third party, or a third and fourth party candidate where we have two independents running, a Republican and a Democrat, or we have someone running with the People's Party or the Green Party and also an independent. And so I don't think this is a ridiculous thing to say given our current political climate.
Exactly. It's weird how the media constantly tries to bully candidates who don't toe the party line into falling into line once they lose the primary. I mean, I'm reminded of Bernie Sanders, who ended up losing in 2016 and in 2020, and he basically was forced to bend the knee to Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. And to me, I'm someone who has a lot of respect for Bernie Sanders because he's basically held the same principles for his entire political career. I don't think he necessarily always lives up to them. But to see him turn around and kowtow to the Democratic establishment made me lose some of that respect. And one of the things that we like about populist candidates and candidates who don't follow the party line is that they are not going to sit there and bend down to whatever the establishment says they have to do.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, especially when it comes to a candidate like Bernie Sanders. And the argument that you get from these establishment Democrats about falling in line and supporting the nominee and picking the lesser of two evils is not a good argument. When we talk about the electorate and you talk about a race like Hillary Clinton's in 2016, we did have Democrats fall in line and vote for Hillary Clinton, even when they didn't want to because they didn't like Donald Trump. And we still got Donald Trump with that strategy. It's an ineffective strategy. Think about the 40% of Americans who are registered to vote, who can vote, but don't participate in our presidential elections. People who are voting age, who could very well go out and cast a ballot, that choose not to participate. Why? I would argue it's likely because they don't feel either party or the candidates running represent their political beliefs or represent them as a person. We've seen candidates win time and time again, not do any of the things they've promised to do on their party platform when they ran, and their personal electoral platform. Biden ran as a progressive and has forgotten a lot of the key things he promised to deliver on. That's been the case for every candidate for quite some time. So there are a lot of people who are rightfully apathetic and don't want to participate in the political process. If you want to win elections, have a competitive primary. Have a candidate that brings people out to the polls. When you talk about the active electorate and them being pulled away to a third party or independent candidate, you're ignoring the fact that there's a base of voters, you're not entitled to any of them, but there's a base of voters that haven't been inspired to participate at all because you've been choosing candidates that don't represent the people. And so those kinds of arguments about Ralph Nader losing the election for Al Gore, et cetera, they just don't make sense when you look at the real numbers of who's participating in American politics and actually casting a ballot.
Yeah, in a democratic republic, we should want candidates that inspire people and motivate people. We shouldn't want two candidates constantly running against each other that nobody likes. And that was one of the reasons why Trump was able to pull off that shock upset in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, is because he was somebody that people wanted to vote for, not that they were necessarily just voting against Hillary Clinton. I know that that was a motivation for some people, but when you compare the base of support to Hillary, there was just simply a huge motivation gap between those voters. And I think that's a good thing, that people would be excited to vote for somebody rather than just kind of holding their nose and casting a ballot. And that's something that we risk having in this election because we're not really having a competitive primary process. I mean, even on the Republican side, it's possible that Trump doesn't even show up to the debates against some of his competitors. And then on the Democratic side, it doesn't seem like they're going to even hold a primary debate. And RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson won't be afforded the opportunity to make the voters aware of what their platform is. And that just seems fundamentally unfair and undemocratic. For the Democratic establishment to sit there and say, we've chosen Biden because he's the incumbent, that's not a good enough reason. It shouldn't be a good enough reason for the voters who are voting in the Democratic primary. Just because the party establishment chose somebody doesn't mean that they should be the nominee.
And I think if you're someone who's protecting the establishment, who is a consultant or even a party leader, you have to consider, and I don't think this is a radical thing to say, but when you look at history and you look at other countries where you get into this territory where the political system is not representing the people that live within the country, there is civil unrest. And so it should be in everyone's vested interest to strengthen our democracy and make it so that people's views are represented and their needs are represented, given that the government in the United States and every country around the world does have a significant role in ensuring we have a functioning economic system. And the United States in particular is doing such a bad job at that there are speeches on the United Nations floor about how they are running the country against the interests of the people that live within it and work within our economic system. That's the state we are in as a country. And when you get to the point where they are holding our political process in their grasp and not allowing us to even vote for the candidate we want to represent us when we are members of a political party, you are in the kind of territory where this country could be described very accurately as an oligarchy. And that is how the United Nations defines the country. And that's a really unfortunate reality. But if you are someone who has a vested interest in maintaining the status quo can't be maintained in conditions where there's civil unrest. And that's really the consequence of allowing this kind of really authoritarian political system to be maintained in a country like ours.
Yeah, and you can tell that the establishment is terrified of RFK Jr. because the media has started attacking him as a conspiracy theorist or the rogue Kennedy who doesn't toe the line, and basically doing anything they can to put his personal character under attack. And in that interview that we just watched, I think that was another tactic to try to make him seem like this unreasonable spoiler for the Democratic Party. We're going to take a quick break and be back with more Rising.